Hello there. So I thought I'd sit next to my beloved orchid for this one, when I inherited from my mum, in fact. So I got a message this morning, and excuse me a moment, I'll just reach over and read it to you. So now I've got it exactly right. If someone took their own life, could you see they had a peaceful passing hypothetically? That's a really interesting question. So let's look into this. So, suicide, taking your own life, killing yourself, that's what we're talking about, so let's have a look into it. My first experience of this was when I was in my 20s. I was living in London. My best friend did this, and it was, as you can imagine, an incredibly deep shock. And the last thing he did before he took his own life, with relation to me, is he gave me a book and said, Keith, there's something about this book, I don't completely get it, but I reckon you'll read it, you'll get it, and it'll mean something to you. So that's the last communication I ever had with him. And I was actually training to be a health counsellor, really inspired by him, funnily enough. Contents of the book are all related, a year or two later. And during that training, we learned something that we could do. And so I found myself doing this. So for 3 months every day, I did a spiritual practice, and it was all about freeing my friend, having known what he'd done to himself. And it was an incredibly moving thing, obviously. And so I created this little altar in the precise way the health counsellor's training advised me to do. And every day I would go to the altar and I would tune in to him. And the very first time I did this was quite a shock, because what I saw that there's my friend Jim, and I saw him in a bubble, if you like. This is like, I didn't know anything about shamanic journeying at that point. I didn't even know shamans did journeying at that point in my life, but I found myself witnessing him, and it was him, and he was in the bubble, and the bubble had like mirror surface all the way around it. And so Jim was looking at this bubble, and all he could see was aspects and reflections of himself. And I instantly realised this would be an extreme form of torment, that your whole existence comes down to only being able to see reflections of yourself. And so I very assiduously did that practice, and it was suggested to do it for 3 months. I did it for 3 months. And then my step-grandfather, funnily enough, also by the same name, Joe, he died. And so I did the same work for him too. He didn't kill himself, but nonetheless I felt that's what I do. So that's where my journey with this comes from, people taking their own lives, suicide and such like. And that's an image that is stuck in my mind for a very long time. I ended up doing a lot of research about it, studying what psychics had to say about it. And now I'm a shamanic practitioner a long, long time later. So I have known a lot of people that have taken their own lives. And it is an incredibly emotive subject, there's no doubt about it. It brings up a lot for people. I will get to the answering of this question, but it takes a little bit of time to get there, so bear with me. We'll see how we go with this. So what I understand as a shamanic practitioner is that if a person dies under the influence of opioid drugs, and it's almost a cast iron certainty that my best friend Jim took a overdose of a pharmaceutical drug, which was almost certainly an opioid drug, particularly because where he was living, which was a squatted house, a mansion really, in Muswell Hill with a whole bunch of other people, he was the only one who wasn't taking heroin at that particular point in the entire block. So it kind of makes sense, opioid drug. So he did. So people who take opioid drugs, they are trapped. And indeed, Cinder's a woman who I was married to and created 2 children with. She died on the influence of an opioid drug too. And so what tends to happen to them is they tend to be stuck, trapped and unable to move on. So when it comes to a person taking their own life, this is what I understand, and I want to give you an allegory for this. I'm going to move completely away from what I've been talking about to give you an allegory. Imagine you have been watching one of your all-time favourite long-running TV shows on Netflix, and every time you switch on the TV to watch this show, you get the preliminary excitement. It's such a riveting, exciting, interesting one, and you look forward to it. And then one day, suppose you switch everything on and it doesn't work, and you discover that for whatever reason Netflix has cut you off and you've been thrown out of your subscription. Who knows why? It doesn't really matter to you, does it? Well, imagine how that would feel, because maybe this is 65 episodes long. It's a really long series of episodes. You're really embroiled in it, and suddenly I can't find out what's going to happen next. Awful feeling. And if that was how you felt, then you would take time, and eventually you get your subscription restored, and eventually find your way into sorting it all out, because you've lost all your preferences. You find eventually you get that show up, and by the time you sat down to watch it, it's quite possible you might not remember which episode it was. So this is my allegory to explain to you what it's like for someone who takes their own life. Now, there are always going to be exceptions to every circumstance. So I'm not talking about someone who's got some hideous, incurable disease that's lived for many, many years. I'm talking about someone like my friend Jim, who was in his 20s. Situation like that. In such a situation, if the person didn't take an opioid drug, which would basically take them into clouded La La Neverland, from which it would be very difficult for them to release themselves without help. And that's where Psychopomp comes in. The shamanic healing tool Psychopomp is used for those that have died, and it's an incredibly powerful tool, and it particularly addresses the person that's died on the influence of opioid drugs. We use a very simple modality to blast the opioid drug residue out of the soul and the spirit of the person, and then it's easy to allow them to invite and encourage them to move on to the next realm in this exciting adventure of multidimensional existence. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about someone who's taken their own life. So that's pretty much how it's going to feel. It's going to feel, oh my goodness me, look what I've done. I pulled the plug. I pressed the game over button at that crucial point in my life, and there I was going through so much pain. And of course now I know that when we're going through so much pain, that's when we're having our really big evolutionary spurts and growths and spiritual epiphanies, and that's what makes this whole incredibly exciting journey of life so amazing. And damn it, I pressed the game over button, and I'm now back with no physical body. All those things that I was learning, exploring, relationship, putting one foot in front of the other, finding how to live, support myself through work, eating, drinking, all those things, it's all gone. And I am so attached to that, because that's what I've been doing, and suddenly I'm back here again. What did I do that for? So let me look at that question again, because as you know what I'm like when I divert, sometimes I might need a little bit of help just to bring myself back to the exact question. If someone took their own life, could you see they had a peaceful passing, hypothetically? So my point is, it's the passing. The passing is a process. And Rudolf Steiner, the incredible spiritual scientist who was alive and working at the very beginning of the 20th century, wrote loads of books about all sorts of subjects, healing, agriculture, education, nutrition, you name it. He wrote about everything. So he wrote about this as well, and in his view, and it's a view shared by many psychics. When a person does end their own life, or when they leave because someone kills them or because they get ill by whatever means, we go through a process called karma loka, and karma loka is where we get a life review, and we will see it all backwards. So it begins with the moment of death and it goes backwards all the way through to the moment of birth. And it takes, well, we're in no time, so this is a bit of a nonsense what I'm going to say now, but when Steiner described it, he says it takes about 1/3. It's like running your life through 3 times the speed. Imagine that. You can do that on YouTube, watching a film. You can change the speed. Imagine seeing everything 3 times the speed, so it takes 1/3 of the time. But as I say, it's really a nonsense, because as soon as you leave the physical body behind, you're into universal time, which doesn't have the same relevance as linear time. But anyway, whatever. So there's a life review that happens, and every single time we hurt someone, we feel the hurt. Welcome to my world, because that's the thing about being a shamanic practitioner. I don't just feel the pains that I feel, and I feel the pains of the clients that I work for, but I feel the overall aggregate pains of what's going on in the society at the time. And so I've been through a rough time lately. Another digression. So at the moment of passing, if the person's under the influence of an opioid drug, it's hell, because they feel trapped, and they literally are trapped until someone or something can come along to free them from what essentially is a prison of their own delusions. These are the exact words I was given. Now, this was many years before I trained to be a shamanic practitioner. I was just a dude who was doing a health counselor's course, and my friend had died a year previously, or whenever it was, I can't even remember when it was, but he died previously at some point, and so I started doing this practice. And I know how I felt when the magical day came, and it was 3 months after I started, and he was free, and that felt like such an amazing moment, and I was shown that. I literally saw it. So every time for the 90 days I've been doing this practice, there he is trapped in his bubble, and I'm encouraging him to become free and offering him support and all the rest of it, and seeing him there. Okay, back to my daily life again, and finally on the last of the days I saw that bubble shatter and he was free. Wonderful. So the really big issue about this is the opioid drugs changed completely what the experience of dying is like. And whether it's suicide or if it's a death under the influence of opioid drugs, that's what tends to happen to them, is they tend to be trapped until they get some help. Which is why psychopomps are a very important part of shamanic practice. There's lots of other energy healers and other people that work for people in this way too. But specifically with the suicide, the aggregate of my understanding is that because they are in the middle of this incredible journey, this human story of their own individual experience as a human being, what is done is in the in-between worlds, everything is done to hasten and to fast track these people so they to come back. And I want to be very clear about this. They are not made to come back. That is their fervent choice. So when it comes to killing yourself and the process happens after that, the biggest things to grasp are as follows. There's this terrible sense of, what have I done? I'm going to have to go back. And that is the most important thing, is this overriding desire to go back and finish what was started. And of course it isn't going to be the same. When they know that, they're not going to go back to the exact same point. It might be many years later, but they go back to the approximately similar circumstances they can arrange and organise. And I am given a very clear understanding they can't be too fussy about this, because their burning need to get back to whatever hell it was that they were in that caused them to end their own life, to make that choice. They want resolution, they want completion, they want to get all sorted. So no, there is no peace for someone that does that takes their own life, until they get themselves incarnated into another physical vehicle and go through babyhood, childhood and all the rest of it, until circumstances as close as they've been able to manufacture are provided for them at their instigation which enables them to go into resolving all those issues which were the very things that was freaking them out to the point they couldn't bear to be here anymore. So that is the answer. Again, I want to clarify, I'm not talking about someone in their 90s who's gone to Switzerland for some euthanasia or whatever it might happen to be. I don't need to elaborate. There are many, many scenarios whereby such a thing might be arranged for people. But if we're talking about someone in decent state of health with no horrific conditions that are making their life completely untenable, we're talking about usual everyday stuff people dealing with: depression, anxiety, alcoholism, you name it, abuse, trauma, PTSD, DID, all these things. Yes, and this is a segue for my next film, which is going to be all about pain, because it's something I haven't spoken about for a long time, and it's come up big time for someone that I'm currently working with. We need to get our act together about that. So the only clue I'm going to give you is this: the greatest pains that we experience in our lives with these physical bodies is what we came here to experience, because there isn't anywhere else that this can be gone through. Out there in the big multidimensional reality, you don't get this experience. You don't get the full physical package like what we get. So my advice to anyone who is contemplating killing themselves, if you know this person, what I'd say to them, I'd give them the allegory of Netflix. It's your favourite show, you've suddenly been suspended, and you don't know how long it's going to take before you're going to get on. You want to know what happens to your favourite show, because it's one of the things that gives your life, dare I say it, pleasure, meaning. I've had certain Korean TV shows that have certainly done that for me. Crash Landing on You being one of the first examples that comes up, and the other one, It's Okay Not to Be Okay. Beautiful shows, so you know what I'm talking about. Right, that's it then. So if you know someone in that situation, suggest to them that they will be so pissed off with themselves if they take that final step. All things being equal, as I've explained earlier. All the love to you, all the love to my mum's beautiful orchid, and look after yourselves, stay safe, and be kind and support each other, because we are the only ones we've got for each other, those who know each other. All the love to you.